Hello you guys, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thank you for being with me for another YouTube question and answer video of the week. If you're new to my channel, I always give a little intro and say welcome and subscribe. Feel free to like and share and comment. Hit the notification button so you'll get notified every time I do a new video, which is once a week now. Typically, I load these up and kind of post them and get them done by Fridays every week. So stay tuned for that. And also, if you have never sent in a question of your own and you have questions that you'd like help processing or dealing with in your own spiritual evolution, feel free to go to my website, which is themodernshaman.net, and go to that contact form. On there, it gives kind of a big blank space where you can fill out any sort of question you might have for me and just title it that it's a YouTube question that you'd love me to answer. I'm always looking and responding to you guys. So here is the question of this week. It says, okay, a while back, I'm going to read it, obviously. She says, a while back I decided to teach meditation and dream work, but then eventually I walked away from it. I have a shaman friend who said that I must get back to my spiritual life. Then she gave this trance channeling that her shaman friend shared. I won't go into all that detail because it's quite long. Her response says, I have been very hesitant to walk back into my spiritual life and the craziness that seems to follow it when your whole family doesn't even want to be around you. It takes an immense amount of work in your practice, meditation, prayer, study, forgiveness, etc. It can be exhausting fitting that into the physical plane. I'm curious to see how others out there are dealing with these issues. Many blessings. Okay. So the question today is basically about this feeling like your spiritual life and your physical life, or the 3D life versus the 5D, or however you want to language it, that those aspects of you feel like they're not integrated or have difficulty integrating them, and you have to choose one over the other. I think it's a great question because a lot of people can relate, right? And I do feel like, I keep looking at it, just historically, this separation of sacred versus secular, flesh versus spirit, physical versus spiritual, have been very segregated in the way that we view them. And I think you probably have heard me talk about this before if you're kind of not new to the channel, but this idea and our models have been very segregated, separated, and have shown us how to do this through isolation, separation, but not a lot of integration, which I feel like is where we are as humanity, as an evolving race, learning how to truly transmute the spiritual experience through the physical plane. So much of where we are right now, and even what you're explaining, is learning how to integrate our evolutionary journey. Instead of having to go on a mountaintop and have this experience, but then never being able to come back down, or having to stay in the monastery, or having to stay in the cave, or like you're saying, having this immense amount of meditation and processing and spiritual kind of deprivation in life, and then not being able to go out and have a regular waking financial supporting system, emotional supporting system, joy-filled life, and feeling like those are two separate experiences. But now is the time of integration, and I think part of what we are doing even as light workers is really obliterating that old system, that old pattern, that old dynamic and that old approach to a spiritual life, to a spiritual evolution. Because even our models, whether it be Gandhi or Jesus or Muhammad or anybody that you look to as an example, they also had to integrate it into a physical life and tried to find a sense of balance with that. We don't always hear about their actual life. There's so much missing in those chunks of the right. I think Buddha is probably the best example of that. And we learned a lot about, or there was a lot of material also on his human existence and how he kind of went from one to the other. But a lot of them are very aesthetic in their practices, very counter, meaning they don't feel like they can have both. They have to choose and segregate and separate, or abolish one way of life for another. So part of this level of integration of how to transmute this kind of experience is where we are right now in humanity. And I think it's very relevant that you brought this up, because we're all learning how to do this. How can we have this sense of equilibrium and balance in the spiritual experience? I also want to make another point that may seem contradictory to what I just said, but a lot of spiritual experience sounds contradictory when we share it in a verbal expression. But because we are multidimensional beings, things are not mutually exclusive. They don't cancel each other out. They exist in that simultaneous now, that space. And that is that every single thing that we are doing is essentially a spiritual experience. Because we are spirit, because we are imbued molecular energetic structures infused with life force energy of the Supreme. This is our being, our very being. So there really can't be any separation. You walk into a corporate life very focused on making money and strengthening a sense of ego and identity, then God is doing those things through you. The Supreme Being that lives in you, that causes the breath and the life of your consciousness, is walking into the corporate world, is flooding itself into that identity, is strengthening itself through the material manifestations of money. It's experiencing that expression via you. It's not separate from that expression, and only holy and only sacred when it is separate and without funds and in all humility and in all separate experience from our material world. It's not. And make no mistake, when we pass away in this material realm, when we move and leave this form and move outside into our non-physical expression and have a sense of life review, every single moment is going to be reviewed as a spiritual experience, as a spiritual lesson, as a spiritual part of your evolution. So there's really not anything that you could say is not a spiritual experience, or you're not living your spiritual life. You are. Your life is spiritual in essence, and everything that you're experiencing will be processed through a spiritual understanding and wisdom in the end. So you can't really get that wrong. But I do understand kind of the way that you're expressing it, like when you were teaching meditation and truly focused on dream work and astral travel and all of this. These are more like training periods, right? Similar to everyone has a physical body, everyone expresses in physical form, but some people are really drawn to be professional athletes, or they love the gym and they want to really work on their physical form, and they love this strengthening of it, and they want to train for triathlons, and they want to try to meet these physical goals as a sense of challenge and growth, and really dive in deep to that material sense of growth. Sometimes our spiritual practices can be like that. We are already all spirit in essence, and yet some of us want to dive really deep into that and train with a sense of Olympian athlete to it. We want to study, we want to teach it, we want to encourage it, we want to strengthen those muscles of astral travel and non-physical connections and mediumship and all sorts of connections. If that's you, you may be that may be a deep time of growth in that one area of expression in your life. And that's a beautiful time. It doesn't mean that you have to be at that all your life, or maybe you will. Some athletes are that devoted all their life. They're just so passionate about it. I'm extremely passionate about my spiritual experience and translating that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing these videos and sharing and teaching and having sessions. And it's always been, ever since I was a child, it's always been a passion of mine. It's just part of my being. And some expressions and some individuals are the same way with different avenues. And you'll notice throughout your life, as you grow and evolve and shift, there are times when you are completely inundated and drawn into certain experiences and just loving learning about travel, or maybe you're learning about I don't know, something that you're really into, right? And there's a time that seems very focused on that, focused on creating that and developing that. And then when it's finished, there's a sense of completion, there's a sense of celebration, and there's a sense of moving on to the next thing. And it's not viewed as something negative, because it is still a part of your evolutionary spiritual experience. All things are, right? So there may be ebbs and flows to that as well within your own heart. And I can tell you, even though I have been doing this and been being this person that is me my whole life, I have never been one for surface conversations. I can remember even as a teenager, if I would go on just like a date with someone, a first date or something, my questions were always like, so what are you passionate about? What are you working on in your soul? What is God telling you? It's like these are things, and most people are just like, tell me what sports team you're into, or just something that I was always very intense about, a sense of growth, and loved that. But at the same time, within my spiritual experience, there have been times when I was very dedicated and my self-discipline was very extreme and aesthetic in nature, of fasting and really just being on my face with my meditation and really just diving in so ultimately with my sense of devotion, just giving everything I could give. There have been times like that, and there have been times when it's just been a lot of sleep, when I didn't want to meditate, when I didn't have that passion for it. I just needed recalibration. I wanted sleep. I needed to be out in nature. I needed to play with animals and children. And those times have been just as profound. So it doesn't mean that your spiritual experience needs to look a certain way in as far as you growing. It's always appropriate for where you are, and that's important to validate. The last thing I want to say before I finish this video is that this all comes down to your own sense of personal peace. Don't we love that? This is ultimately your experience and journey on this planet. And all of your experiences, all of your choices, all of your internal world, external world, all of it has to essentially find its own equilibrium and balance within you. And that will look different for you than it looks for anyone else. For some reason, we love to compare. We love to chart and say, I'm doing good because I'm here and this person's there. But we have to get rid of all of that when it comes to our own sense of personal balance and personal peace. And you have to get very, very honest with yourself, right? Can't lie to yourself. Your energy knows its own truth. And it knows its own dissonance when something feels frictional to your soul, frictional to your spirit. So if you are in a time where you are diving deep into something Let that be your truth, that this is what I'm choosing right now. It doesn't mean I will always choose this, but this is where I am, period. This is my truth. This is my presence. This is my current exploration. This is what I'm bringing my divine source and alignment with divinity into in this moment. This is how I'm experiencing the Supreme Being in this manner. Having your own sense of personal peace with it. This also includes a sense of kind of self-assessment and judgment and wisdom. This doesn't mean negative, judging yourself negatively, but if there are areas in the past that you felt like were out of alignment or had dissonance in them, meaning friction within the way it was done, then you notice it and you say, yeah, that's where things got out of alignment. That's where I lost a little bit of my balance there. And even within the spiritual working community of light workers, there are plenty of people or of times when we're doing wonderful work, but we start to get out of alignment with our practice. It starts to not feel as joyous. It starts to feel arduous, or it starts to feel unbalanced and draining. These are, no matter what you're doing, okay? Whether it's working as a flight attendant or working as a healer, doesn't matter the title. In your soul, as your sense of personal integrity, of kindness, of honor, of genuine help and care, and what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, always staying in that sense of peace and alignment with yourself is imperative. And learning how to do that, learning how to see it, and then move yourself back into alignment and balance, no matter what title or position or job or effort that you're putting out in the material world. That and your own sense of personal peace is paramount for you and your own experience. So just come back to you, why you're doing what you're doing, and having that sense of balance there. That is my final piece of encouragement. I love you guys. No, nothing but love. Nothing but love, love, love on your path and just supporting your journey. Blessings. I'll be back here next week.